Secretary. Last week we had a discussion about the Monuments and the Antiquities Act, and I'm delighted to have Senator Tester join with me, and I appreciate your answer to him being the same one that you gave to me. And I want to turn now to another issue that I'm sure won't come as a surprise, and that's oil and gas. And the primary issues that we're faced with right now in the country are jobs and the deficit. Those are the two things I hear the most about when I'm out campaigning. Where are the jobs? What are you doing to get us with jobs? And gee, we hate all this government spending. We hate the size of the deficit. I think the two are interrelated with respect to oil and gas. Maybe some don't understand it, but the revenues that come from oil and natural gas, next to the income tax, are the largest source of revenue in the federal government. Program pays for itself many times over. The study I've seen says that onshore oil and gas program generates $46 for every dollar spent on the program, and $123 when you factor in income and other taxes. Income paid by people who are working in the industry, by the companies, et cetera. Pretty tough to come up with any example of a federal program that can produce a $146 return on every dollar spent. And of course there are jobs. Now your budget proposes a significant increase in the application for a permit drill fee, a new non-producing lease fee, a new inspection fee, a rulemaking for onshore royalty rate increase, and new taxes on the oil and gas industry. Now, I'm a businessman, and when we have a problem with a product, you don't raise prices on it in an effort to have it move more. And we have something here that we want to continue, and yet with all of these increased fees and increased prices, I think there's going to be an impact both on the jobs and on the amount of money that the federal government receives. Because we've already seen in my home state, with the reaction to what's been done in the areas that we've talked to Mr. Hayes about, companies saying, well, we're just not going to fool with dealing with the federal government. We're going to take our rigs and we're going to go someplace else. And they move from Utah to Oklahoma or Texas or some other places. And now you're saying, well, if you do stay on federal lands, we're going to charge you significantly more by virtue of this. And we have a tremendous unemployment problem in jobs in Uintah County and Duchesne County as this industry dries up. My question is, has there been any analysis, economic, statistical analysis of what will happen to revenue reductions, both in state and federal treasuries, because the state gets a lot of revenue from this, as a result of this increase in fees?
The answer, Senator Bennett, I appreciate first the questions that you asked last week on monuments and the question you asked today on oil and gas. Our job, as I see it, as the Secretary of Interior, is to make sure that taxpayers are getting their fair return. And when you look at the statistics relative to the number of acreage that has been leased on the onshore as well as on the offshore in the last year, it is apace with what was done in the previous 8 years. And when you look at the fees that we are collecting, those fees, I believe, are fees that are affordable by the oil and gas industry. The economic downturn that we have seen with respect to oil and gas, I think, has been driven simply because of the lower cost of natural gas and not because of the fees. The $6,500 permit application fee, the APD that we charge, that was in last year's budget. And it's in this year's budget again. It's a tough budget, and we're trying to make tough choices here. Let me say that as we look at these things, it's important that we are doing it from a rational economic point of view. And so I have had the Bureau of Land Management and the economists of the Department of Interior look at ways in which we are making sure that we're getting that fair return to the taxpayers. And so, for example, the 12.5% royalty that is paid onshore by an oil and gas producer has been the same royalty that's been in place since 1920, when the 1920 Mineral Leasing Act was passed. It was then called the King's Share. It still could be called the King's Share today. And you compare that to what is being paid to the states, whether it's Texas, somewhere in the range of 20%, or South Dakota. There is room for economic analysis to make sure that we're getting it right here, and that's what we're trying to do.
Let me just quickly, Madam Chairman, to take the Texas example. If you make an application in Texas to drill on state land, the application is approved in about 19 or 20 days. People who have been trying to get leases done in Utah have filed resource management plans that have taken 7 years to come to fruition, going back to what Senator Collins had to say about her circumstances. And then, as we know, some of those after the 7 years have been turned down by you when you became, and now you've put in additional delays. I think they'd be happy to pay a 20% royalty if they could get on the ground within 19 days. It's the combination of the increased fees for which they get no services. If you get something for what you pay, they're willing to pay. But I don't think it's really a fair comparison between what is happening in states that use their money to facilitate this, create the jobs, and get the revenue, than the federal government that, at least in my state, keeps delaying, and now increases the cost. I would appreciate if you would do a careful analysis of the impact of this on jobs, as well as the overall impact on revenue, because it's one thing to say this, we're increasing the percentage, but a higher percentage of nothing produces a whole lot less revenue than a lower percentage of something that's moving forward. And I have the fear that that's what's happening, at least in my state, with respect to oil and gas. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I may, Madam Chair, just a quick response, Senator Bennett. I very much look forward to working with you and others on the ground to get it right. I think that what we have seen is that in the prior administration in the last year, 49% of the oil and gas leases were protested, and so when we have 7-year delays, it's because of the litigation that ensues because it's not being done right. And so going back—
The 7-year to produce the RMP had nothing to do with the environmental suits.
But going back to the principle that Director Abbey and I are driving here is we want to get it smart from the start. And I think by knowing where oil and gas production is going to take place is something that we ought to be able to do to provide more certainty to the oil and gas producers. That's part of what we are trying to do with the rules and the outreach that Director Abbey and Assistant Secretary Lewis are doing, including going back to Utah and having additional conversations with organizations like IPAMS and others about how we can get it right.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair.